Hello and welcome to today's edition of Your Questions Answered with Father Gruner. I'm John Veneri. We take your questions in this program. Father Gruner answers them. We discuss them. Please continue to send us your questions at questions@thefatimacenter.com. Here's kind of a follow-up question. The person writes, I just watched your video on NFP, that it stands for Natural Family Planning. I had no idea about this. Is Humane Vitae wrong then, as it seems to allow both NFP and choosing the amount of children one has? Please answer, because this is important.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to point out that Humane Vitae upholds the Catholic doctrine, which was taught for all time and still taught, even though a lot of people don't talk about it, which Humane Vitae says, and he even invokes in that passage, that by my apostolic authority, each and every interruption of the procreative act, in other words, to frustrate it from being realized, in other words, to frustrate it from that God, if he wanted to give human life in this act, is wrong. Casti Connubii, that's by Pope Pius XI in 1930, said each and every act of contraception, whether it's a pill or whether it's some sort of device, is a mortal sin. Mm-hmm. So Paul VI is upholding, of course, what Pius XI explains even much clearer than Paul VI. Part of the problem with Paul VI is his style of writing is not as clear as the popes before the council. The second thing, but when we're talking about natural family planning, the idea is that a person does not use some device but using the natural rhythms of the woman's body when to have marital relations, and to time these so as to avoid having children. I think that's a fair statement.
It. Yes.
It's one thing to say. So first of all, using some unnatural means is always wrong, whether it's, I say, a pill or some device. But even natural family planning itself is not always acceptable. So there has to be a sufficient reason. And I think you'll find this more clearly taught in Casti Connubii than you'll find in Humane Vitae. But it's the same doctrine, which is...
Even though they don't use the term natural family planning, they use periodic abstinence or something like that.
Yes, it is. And so that document is, I'm sure, quite available. If they can't find it, we can certainly make it available to them. My point being that he clearly points out that to use the natural rhythms of a woman's body to avoid having children altogether is always wrong, because if you did that with the intention of having children, then your marriage isn't valid in the first place, because if you enter the marriage state not to have and use the privilege of the marital act and not accepting the responsibility of children, then you're never married. And he makes that very clear in this verse. But if someone say, well, I already have some children, so I can do this now, not necessarily. There has to be a sufficient reason. And that is clearly taught, I think, by Casti Connubii. I don't know, I can't remember how well it's taught in Humane Vitae. I don't think Humane Vitae contradicts anywhere Casti Connubii. Casti Connubii is much clearer in its teaching.
Yeah, the best place to look is Casti Connubii, because there's a whole, what you call a whole NFP industry right now that is promoting NFP as a way of life.
Yes.
And this is never part of the nature of marriage to begin with, and also of Catholic teaching, that you could adopt this as a way of life. What they used to call periodic abstinence, there always had to be serious reason and for a limited amount of time.
Yeah, the whole idea, for example, that if obviously the woman's health, and it's understood, I believe, I'm not an expert in these things, that a woman having one child followed by another child immediately afterwards, I'm saying some women can do that, but some women find it very difficult to do that. And so it's been argued, I believe, that you can have space, giving them time to have some space between the birth of the first child and the second child, or the second and third. But it's not 5 or 10 years. It could be, I don't know whether it's 6 months or a year. But my point being, but that's a limited time, and it's the health of the mother is certainly a sufficient reason. But not having a second TV set or a second car or the children going to college, that's not sufficient reason.
Well, another thing too, I know we talked about this in a previous program, but I'll repeat it here for those who didn't see it. The fact that they're using the term family planning.
Yeah.
Family planning is Planned Parenthood terminology.
Yes.
Family planning is the anti-life terminology.
Yes.
It is the pro-abortion, pro-contraceptive terminology that Catholics have incorporated, put natural in front of it, and sprinkled some holy water on it, and they think that this is thoroughly legitimate as a lifestyle. We should be rebelling against the term family planning to begin with.
Absolutely. But I think that the problem has been, if you don't remember, I'm sure you might remember, I certainly remember, back in 1968 when Humanae Vitae came out.
Well, I was little then, but
there were theologians calling for, rebelling against this. The Catholic bishops in their Winnipeg statement said, well, if your conscience says you disagree with Paul VI, you go ahead and do what you think is right. Opposite of what he's saying. No, we don't. The conscience has to be informed, and the magisterium has spoken on this thing, not only with Paul VI but before, and you don't have if you go agenst the teaching of the Catholic Church in this, you're signing yourself a ticket on the way to hell. The point that and even the Catholic bishops, all of them, there was one priest rather, who wrote against them. He's still on record. He's still alive. He's got to be 95, he's 70 years or 75 years a priest this year. Monsignor Vincent Foy.
Yes.
And he condemned the whole lot of the Catholic bishops in Canada who signed on to that Winnipeg statement. I don't know if they've ever formally withdrawn it. They might have many years.
I think the German bishops, the bishops of Germany and Austria too, I think they were more along the lines of the Canadian bishops.
Yeah. It even in the States, there was
Charles Carron, yes.
And all these people. But so, and there's priests today who unfortunately, I remember hearing a sermon. I should have spoken out and said this is wrong, but I heard a sermon in Canada. I think it was in Winnipeg, if I'm not mistaken. And this is going back some 30 years. And he was telling them, we follow your conscience. But no, your conscience has to be informed, and you cannot. So this is and I think it's mentioned in the Third Secret. I think it's in the Third Secret of Fatima. This is where, when Malachi Martin says the churches will be full, people will be beating their breasts, and be asking God and be long lines for confession. It is because this, I believe, is mentioned. The sin of contraception is mentioned in the Third Secret. And certainly it talks about the sins of the Vatican, but also talks about the sins of the people who are following this.
So there's a lot of things today that are just generally accepted, but we do have to stand back and examine them under the only criteria that really counts, and that is the perennial Catholic teaching of all time.
Yes.
That is the objective standard. That's the gold standard.
Yeah.
And even if the priest says something different, well, the priest is on a head-on collision with the faith of all time.
And even if the Pope says something different, it doesn't change.
Yes. So anyway, we hope we've answered that. And also, it's very good, too. I know they're hard to find, but with these type of personal questions in married life, to find a very good confessor, someone who's learned and someone who's traditional, and someone who has that objective standard as his standard.
And we're not trying to say, I'm a great guy, I'm a really, no, this is the truth. Yeah. By living by the truth, you'll be happy and you'll save your soul. By refusing the truth, you won't be happy, and not even in this world, you won't be happy. Living by this idea of the contraceptive mentality is frustrating for both partners. And it comes. Perhaps another question we can talk about is that the whole idea of the final purpose of marriage is the procreation, education of children. It is not. If you put God first, then all other things will be added to you. If you put yourself first, then putting equal to God. So you made a contract with God to accept the children He wants to send you. I still remember the sermon given by Father Minnelli to this couple. He says, now that you're man and wife, God has a vocation for this family. And guaia voia, woe unto you if you don't have all the children God intends to send you. And he repeated it 2 or 3 times. Mm-hmm. And it was in Italian, of course, but that's what it is. The whole point is that you're making a deal with God. You've made a contract with God, and you can't interfere with that contract. Yes, you can space things out if there's a serious reason, but not for some vanity or for some advantage, worldly advantage. That's not enough.
Well, thank you, Father. We've run out of time on this one, and we will see you on the next broadcast. Thank you.